Hi and welcome back to the channel. Well, if it's your first time here, my name's Andrew and today I'm going to be looking at the 10 settings you need to change immediately if you've got yourself a new DJI Osmo Action 6. Now don't get me wrong, you can use the camera straight out of the box and you will get some great footage, but if you want to take it up to that next level, there are a few things you need to change immediately just to improve your footage before you start, and I'm going to go through those options with you now. Now, the camera itself is a great bit of kit and it does some wonderful results straight out of the box. But there are some minor adjustments we can make to the settings of the camera just to improve it that little bit more. And before I start, I'm not sponsored, it's an early Christmas present. So if you could do the like and subscribe thing, that would be greatly appreciated. So the settings I'm going to go through are the ones I use every day. It's going to cover the basics like stabilization, field of view, white balance, exposure, that type of thing. Very, very basic, but it will help you get the best out of the camera. So let's crack on. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to be the resolution that you're recording in. Now, straight out of the camera, it's going to be set to 1080p, and that's going to be fine if you're just using it for things like, say, you're going on a bike ride and you want to have better battery life. But if you want to get the best quality out of the camera, then you need to switch that up to 4K, and that's what I tend to do with all my footage. Now, even if you intend on exporting at 1080p, it still makes sense to record at 4K because you're going to get a better quality even when you reduce it down than filming just in 1080p itself. So it's always better to film in the highest possible resolution that you can. In this case, it's going to be 4K. Now, when it comes to frame rate, with the action cams, I always tend to set them to 60 frames a second. This means that if I want to, it's going to give me more flexibility. If I've got a shot going on, I can always slow it down to 30 frames a second or even down to 24, 25 frames a second to give me a nice little slow motion effect in the middle of a bit of footage. But again, that's going to be up to you. But remember that the higher the frame rate, the larger the file is going to be of the footage. But you need to make sure you've got enough space on your SD card and that your computer can handle the larger files. And also when you go into the video settings, on the top right hand corner, you're going to have the two options for your RockSteady or your stabilization plus your field of view. Now, in most cases, RockSteady is going to be plenty because it's going to give you a nice stabilization on the camera. It's going to look more natural. So I would recommend probably sticking with RockSteady if you're just trying to do just everyday sporting events or walking, vlogging, that type of thing. I wouldn't recommend switching it off because then you're going to lose all your stabilization and that's going to result in just shaky footage even with the smallest of movements. Next we got RockSteady Plus, which is just an enhancement of the basic RockSteady, so it's going to give you better stabilization, but it can look a little bit fake, so sometimes you are better off going for that little bit of movement just with the basic RockSteady. Now the other option you've got is horizon balancing, and with horizon balancing, that's going to keep the horizon level depending on the rotation of the camera. So it goes up to 45 degrees. So as long as the camera is anything between 0 and 45, then the horizon is going to stay level. So it doesn't matter if the camera is slightly off level like this, as long as it's within the 45 degree threshold, the horizon's always going to stay level. And again, now this is filming in horizon balancing. So if I change the camera, so that's gone over to 90 degrees, and it's back to normal. You can see the difference there. And then finally, we've got HorizonSteady, and with HorizonSteady, it does exactly what it says. It doesn't matter which way that the camera is going to turn because the horizon is always going to be kept level. But the only thing you need to remember with both of these options is that the cropping is going to be more severe than you would get if you're using RockSteady or RockSteady Plus. And you're going to be limited with the field of view being down to the default D-warp. So you're not going to get a wide field of view, you're going to have a smaller field of view, and that's going to be cropped in dramatically if you are using horizon balancing or HorizonSteady. So you can see here, as I move the camera about, the horizon is going to stay nice and level and straight through the center. And this one's on HorizonSteady, and I've got the camera now upside down as I'm filming and walking. So you can see the difference between the two. So RockSteady is going to be good for high vibration activities such as running, jogging, vlogging, and it's going to give you a nice level of stability. Whereas HorizonSteady is going to be good if you're mounting the camera on your helmet and you want to keep the horizon, as it says, nice and level. Now when you're using RockSteady or RockSteady Plus, it's going to give you 4 different fields of view. Now they're going to be standard or D-warp, natural wide, wide and ultra wide. But the bigger field of view you get, the more distorted on the edges that your footage is going to be. So for example, if you're just using the basic DWAP, everything is going to be nice and flat. But if you're using something as wide as the ultra wide, then towards the edges, you are going to get this sliced curve into your footage, which is quite noticeable. So again, it depends on exactly what you're filming, on which field of view that you want to use. So if you're using the camera just for vlogging, you're probably better off just using the standard DWAP. But if you're using it for really wide action shots, so you're going mountain biking, you may be better off going for the ultra wide. So ultra wide is going to give you the widest possible view, but it is going to give you a lot of distortion. And also if you're using the horizon balancing or the HorizonSteady, then you're going to be limited just to the standard field of view. You can't use any of the other ones, such as the wide angle, natural or ultra wide. Now DJI have introduced a new field of view, which is the natural wide, and that's a nice balance between the DWAP and the wide because it reduces the amount of vertical distortion you're going to get when you're filming. So from a personal point of view, I either tend to use the DWAP if I'm vlogging or go on to the natural wide if I'm doing things like mountain biking. So rule of thumb, if you want to have perfectly level footage, then use HorizonSteady. If you want to have a maximum field of view with a more natural movement, then use RockSteady. And this is the point where I stop for 2 minutes and say, I'm not sponsored, so if you could do the like and subscribe thing, that would be great. The camera itself was an early Christmas present off my wife, and I need to prove to her that doing this YouTube lark is worthwhile. So if you could do the like and subscribe, that would be great. There's also an option below for buy me a coffee if you're finding it useful. Any funds I get from that is obviously going to go towards new equipment to help grow the channel. So that again would be appreciated. We also need to change the bitrate. Now the bitrate is the amount of information that's sent from the camera onto your SD card. So the higher the bitrate, the better, because more information is going to be sent. So to change this, we need to go into settings again, and then scroll down to where it says bitrate, and you can see by default that it's set to standard. So we need to change this to high. Now having a higher bitrate does mean that the files you're storing on the SD card are going to be larger, so you are going to use up space more quickly. But that's the trade-off you're going to have for getting better video quality. It also means that the camera is going to get slightly hotter because there's more processing power going into converting that footage from the standard bitrate to the higher bitrate. But as I said, you will get better quality overall when you're using a high bitrate as opposed to a standard. Now another new thing that DJI have introduced with the Action 6 is video quality priority. And this again is going to enhance the video that you're taking with your new camera. But once you go into it, which is done via the video settings on the bottom, you will see then the option for video quality. You will get a message popping up saying that the overall camera power is going to be reduced because it's more processing, and also that the camera may get a little bit hotter. But like using the bitrate, it is going to give you a better overall result in the end. Now if you are doing a long recording and the camera is static, so there's no airflow around it, I would recommend not using the video priority because it means the camera is going to get too hot. So it's only really useful for shorter shots and somewhere where you are on the move, so you do get an airflow going around the camera, and that's going to help keep it cool. Another way to improve your footage is the use of grid lines. Now grid lines give you a visual representation on the screen of the camera that is divided into thirds. And we use what is known as the rule of thirds to do the composition. So you try and get the main subject on one of the thirds, either horizontally or vertically. So for example, if you're shooting a beach scene, you may want to have 2/3 of the beach in and 1/3 of the sky, or alternatively, if you're shooting something actually on the water, you may want to get 2/3 of the sky and 1/3 of the sea. Similarly, if you're shooting a building, you may want to get it on one of the vertical lines. Now to get the rule of thirds on, you just go into the settings, scroll down to where it says grid lines, and that's going to give you the options of the grid lines themselves, which as I said, is just going to be the horizontal and vertical lines, or you can have the diagonal lines, which are going to give you a more central point, or you can have a combination of both. Having grid lines on is going to benefit you, as I said, when it comes to composition, but remember that those lines only appear on the screen of the camera, they're not actually transferred onto the footage itself. So those are some of the basic settings you can do just to improve your everyday footage. But if you want to improve that even further, there's more that we can do in the settings of the camera as well. So the first thing we need to do is go into the settings by pressing the two lines on the right hand side, and we can see that we've got the new option for variable aperture. Now, I generally tend to leave that in auto, and that's mainly because I'm fairly new with the camera. I'm not really 100% how it works. So until I get more au fait with that, I'd rather let the camera handle that part of the filming. Now below that, you can see that you've got the options for image adjustment. And this will allow you to change the sharpness or texture as it's known on the Action 6, and also the noise reduction of the footage itself. Now most action cameras, especially DJI ones, do tend to over sharpen the image. So we want to try and set that level of the texture or sharpness down to -1 or at a push -2. But remember, if you over sharpen an image, you can't get it back. So it's always best to go to -1 because you can always change the sharpness in post-production. So if you're shooting faces, people, or you want a more cinematic look, then having it set to the -1 or at a push, as I said, -2 is going to give you a more cinematic feel. And then we've got the noise reduction. So again, we want to reduce that. If you're out filming in a bright environment or there's somewhere with plenty of light, you can just leave that as -1. But if you're filming and you're in a more enclosed environment, maybe under canopies or it's a bit more dusky, then you want to reduce that to -2, and that's going to improve the footage as well no end. So noise reduction does try too hard in low light conditions and can smear the details. So having it set lower will mean that you're going to get cleaner shadows, less smearing, better detail retention, and a more film-like texture. So my basic settings for that is -1 for the sharpness / texture, and also -1 for the noise reduction. Now, as I said, I don't tend to play about with the aperture, but one thing I do try and set is the white balance. Now, white balance is the color temperature going from cold to warm depending on the Kelvin value that you've got set on the camera. And the white balance sensor is this little sensor on the front of the camera there. So obviously you set your white balance because you don't want your color temperature changing halfway through your filming. And this can occur simply by clouds passing in front of the sun. So you're going to get more sunlight in, and it's going to make the image warmer, and that can ruin your footage. So always try and keep the color temperature on a manual setting so you know that it's locked in. So if you're filming in general daylight, then round about 5500 is going to be ideal. But if you're filming in more cloudy conditions, then you want something around about the 6000 to 6500 mark. If you're shooting indoors, then maybe 3200 would be okay if you're shooting under tungsten lights. It also allows you to be more creative. So again, if you're shooting things like sunset or sunrises, maybe having it set to 6100 is going to bring a lot of warmth into your footage. Whereas if you're filming and you're skiing, you only want it to be a little bit cooler, then having it set to around about 5000 is going to be perfect. So obviously you're not going to know what white balance to use if you're just starting out. So the trick to do is to go into the white balance settings, click it on to auto, and then the camera is going to detect what the right white balance is going to be, and then select the manual mode, and that's going to lock it in. So then if the color temperature does change, the camera is still going to be fixed on what you actually set at the beginning of your recording. Another issue we got with action cams is they do always tend to overexpose your image. But again, we can mitigate this by going into the Pro settings, and you can see there that we've got exposure values. So first of all, on the right hand side, you can see that you've got the exposure evaluation. So for me, to get the best out of the camera, I tend to have it to either -0.3 or -0.7. Because if an image is underexposed, it's always easier to bring those shadows back in post-production, whereas if an image is overexposed, then you've lost that data for good. So it's always better to err on the side of caution and underexpose your image rather than overexpose it. Now on the right hand side, you've got the ISO, and normally with ISO you try to keep it as low as possible, but I tend to have it on the manual mode but limit it to 800. So the camera will do between 100 and 800 ISO when I'm out filming. You can take that a step further if you want to and go into manual, and then you can set it to the exact ISO that you want, 100, 200, whatever. So for myself, I just find that -0.3 for the exposure value and the ISO set, the range between 100 and 800 works ideal. Okay, so those are the 10 basic things you need to do to the camera straight out of the box. There are going to be further videos where I cover things like the aspect ratio, using external mics, color grading, and power saving tips as well. And they're going to be in this video up here. So as I said earlier, if you did find it useful, if you could do the like and subscribe thing, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'll catch you in a few days' time when I've done the other video. So thanks so much for watching, and bye.